Hi, I'm Zach Waters, and welcome to another episode of WTF-STOP Photo Talk, where I chat to photographers about their life and connection to the world through photography. Welcome to episode 11 of WTF-STOP podcast Photo Talk. Today's guest is photojournalist Denis Thorpe. Denis has been a photographer, photojournalist, editorial photographer for over 70 years. I'd been talking to Denis on and off for a while, and I really wanted to get up to Stockport where he lived and meet him face to face, be able to have a chat with him about his life, his work, how he connected with the industry, how he connected as a photographer with the world, his longevity really. I wanted to find out a bit about the man behind the camera. So I was in Manchester a few weeks ago, helping out and exhibiting at the Photo North Festival in Manchester. So I got up really early on Sunday morning with a very heavy head, got on a train, headed to Stockport and met up with Denis at his home, where we talked about his birds.
In fact, I was even talking to a robin. I remember saying to the robin, "What am I doing wrong?"
Him and Andre Curtage hanging out in Salford.
I remember saying to Andre Curtage, would you like to have a look at Salford with me?
And how important his children were to him throughout his career.
When I was on the Daily Mail in the early days, I would find myself on the night shift most of the time in the early days. And I found it was wonderful because I could spend time with the family, and I could take the kids out.
Yeah. And then when he was making me a cup of tea in his kitchen, I asked him, "What are you up to, Denis?"
What am I up to now? I've been concentrating on my latest obsession, which has been, because of COVID and because of lockdown, I've not been able to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And I've been sort of stuck in the house. So I was watching my bird population, the small birds. I've never really been interested in birds. My wife, she organised a beautiful garden, wonderful garden. Yeah. And I watched birds coming into the garden, but I haven't a clue what they were. So I thought, well, I'll take a little more interest in them. And then, because I'm a photographer, I saw them perched on a twig or whatever, and I thought, they're there, and then they're not. What happens in between? I thought, I'll get myself a challenge. I'll try and photograph them in flight. Impossible. I sat for months and months on an old bench out there, till these birds got used to me, and they came up to the feeders, and then they were gone. Occasionally I was really lucky, or I was getting better at it. And in fact, I was going a bit mad, to be honest. In fact, I was even talking to a robin. I remember saying to the robin, "What am I doing wrong?"
28
and I remember the robin said back to me, "You're not on. You put it on. What camera have you got? Put it on a 4000." So I was doing that, and then it all happened that I was able to photograph goldfinches, beautiful things happening in my garden, and all in action, which was the most important thing for me.
It was published in The Guardian.
Yes, it was. In the end, yes.
Yeah,
my Guardian colleague, Chris Thomond, he saw what I was doing, so he kept taking the odd file and putting it into the Guardian's bank of pictures.
You've had a number of books out. You've had at least 5 I know of. You've had View from the North, On Home Ground, The Guardian, 100 Years, Long Exposure, that was the Manchester based one.
Yes.
Shepherd's Year, and Denis Thorpe, 50, 2000. But while I was sitting here, and I got you to sign my View from the North, which was published by Blue Coat Press, you just piled up a stack of books next to me. So let's go through them. And we can talk about this one, which you've just been talking to me about. So what have we got here? We've got the family. So this is, you self-publishing these, aren't you?
Yes.
So
yes.
you've got the family, and then what else we got here? I've got, which is, I'm interested in this, how they were, which is, I guess, because that, who's that?
So I'm sorry. That's Helen Mirren.
Helen Mirren.
Yes.
So I guess this
Most
is...
famous people are there.
Yeah, and then this is your jobbing life, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, and this is your... I remember the Louis Armstrong pictures. So this is... We'll look through that in a second. So this is your jobbing life. Then you've got India 77.
Yes.
And then you've got people of the Soviet Union. That really sounds really interesting. Then you've got the trawler men, which is colour, and the family's colour.
It's not all colour.
The one?
It's not all colour.
Well, there's a cover...
Do you know, I went on the Cod War, right? In 1958, I think it was. I went on a steam trawler from Grimsby, and the Cod War was about a 12-mile limit. And of course, they had gunboats, and we had a presence up there. I was really there for the action of the trawlermen being confronted by Icelandic gunboats.
This is 1958. It's beautiful. There's some beautiful stuff in here. Where could we get this? Where could you get this? Would you have to go on Blurb to buy this?
I don't really put them on Blurb. I just make them because I need to have them. I need to have them as a collection. You see, it's my archive really.
But this should be a book on itself.
Well, let me tell you about that because I was at the Daily Mail actually at the time, and they asked me to go to look at the Cod War, but they were really only interested in the action. I was there for a month on a steam trawler.
You look as though you.
But the thing is that
you have been on there for a month because of the engagement with the subject.
But the thing is that the action wasn't very often. What the Icelandic people were doing was trying to cut the trawl. Once they go over and cut the trawl wires, the trawlermen have to go back home again because they can't fish anymore.
Yeah, sabotage.
So that's how it was being prevented.
Right.
So not a very easy thing to photograph. Yeah. But I did photograph things. Now the thing is getting my photographs back. You know, I got my laptop there, hadn't I, in 1958.
Time traveller.
So in fact, what I did, the skipper said, "There's only one way we can get your films back." He said, "I'll get a cocoa tin, we'll put them in it, and we'll shoot a line across to a ship that's going back to the mainland." And we shot a line, and they took my cocoa tin with my films in. Then they sent, as soon as they got to the mainland, they put it in the post for me, and it was picked up by the Daily Mail. I got one photograph in, possibly.
Caught a passing ship, sent it on a wire over the ship.
That's it.
Wow.
Yes.
You're very trusting.
They were wonderful people to be with. It took me a long time, really, because they were quite... I mean, they didn't know what on earth a reporter, photographer was about, you know. So that's the main thing about being in photojournalism, really, is getting to know people.
Absolutely.
And getting their trust.
And understanding your relationship.
And that's more important than anything.
It is.
You can put the cameras away forever, but until you've got that rapport with people. I thought, well, I'll just carry on. Do you know, I only had one camera. I had a second-hand Rolleiflex. I was experimenting with colour. I had one roll of Ferrania colour film.
For that shoot?
For that. Well, because I didn't, there was no way I was doing, I was going on a news job, you see. I took a lot of black and white film for myself, and so I thought, well, I'll just photograph all these wonderful people and and their lives.
What film were you using, black and white?
It was probably probably HP3 in those days, Ilford.
Was it really in 58 HP3?
Yes.
Wow. And you got a colour cover on that.
There might have been some Tri-X, I don't know.
Yeah.
The reason I'm using a Rolleiflex is that when I went eventually to the national newspaper, I was offered a staff job on the Daily Mail in London.
Yeah.
The picture editor said that the deal will be that you go to Manchester.
Really?
Yes. So I went to Manchester. I was still using at the time, if you want to talk about equipment and things, technical things, but I've always used 35mm cameras. I had a beautiful Contax 2 camera. If you talk about picture post people, most of them had the Contax 2. Bert Hardy did, and Kurt Hutton certainly did, with Leicas as well. But the Contax at the time was absolutely beautiful. The one I had was made in something like 1936, I think. Then when I got there, they said, "Oh no, you can't use that. That's a toy camera." and so I was given a plate camera using glass plates.
Ones.
Yes, using glass plates. So I thought, well, I can't use that because the dark rooms liked to have the simple way of processing. They can process plates easily, slap them in the enlarger, wet, and print wet, all those. So it's a very, very simple way of going. It's okay for one-shot kind of things, but not my kind of thing. Anyway, I compromised. I then went and bought a Rolleiflex, a second-hand Rolleiflex, which cost me in 1958, 57, 58. It cost me about £135 then, second-hand, So that's what I was using on the Grimsby trawler. Daily Mail weren't interested, in the lifestyle of. That's not the kind of thing they wanted. I mean, it was a news business, isn't it? Yeah. And they're not really interested in a picture story of the lifestyle of.
Let's go back before the Mail. Let's go back into your early childhood and the time which led up to you realising photography was what you wanted to do. Can you take me there?
I can take you right back.
Good.
I mean, it wasn't photography that I was interested in. At school, we had English teacher who one day said, "I want you to be reporters, and I want you to write a report. I want you to use your imagination." And the imagination is the great word. I want you to use imagination and go to an event and write about it. So I wrote about the only thing I ever knew, and that was about mining, because I was brought up in a mining community, you see. And I wrote about a pit disaster.
Where were you brought up? Whereabouts were you brought up as a child?
In Mansfield, Nottingham.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are a lot of coal mines around there.
Yeah.
In fact, my father, when he was 14, he went to have his first working experience in a pit. He didn't like working with. They had pit ponies, I think, then. But he then decided he didn't want to work down underground, so he went and worked in a foundry. So it was similarly really hard graft, working in a foundry. So, but a lot of my relatives were in mining, and I used to go and stay with them. They all seemed to be getting injured and everything like this, So I knew all about. So I wrote this little piece And the wonderful thing is that it's quite unusual, but the teacher, he read it out to the class. And what did I want to be after that? I wanted to be a reporter. And so that was my ambition.
And that was when you started getting...
That was my ambition.
The direction.
I went eventually, when I left school at 16, I was desperate to be on a newspaper, and I managed to get an interview with the editor of a local paper in Mansfield. And the editor said, "Do you know anything about photography?" I said, "Not much, no, I want to be a reporter." He said, "Well, we're employing now a staff photographer here, and he needs an assistant. How about you be his assistant?" So I said, and they said, once you're in newspapers, you can do anything. So I said, "Wonderful." So I became the photographer's assistant. And what the wonderful thing was that I knew nothing about press photography. Really, hardly anything. I'd never even seen a press photographer, I don't think. But what was the wonderful thing was that this guy didn't have one of these big plate cameras. You know, if you looked at magazines and you saw American photographers really with great big speed graphics with big flash things on. That was my sort of image of a press photographer. Yeah. This guy had a small contact camera, but he was so meticulous, and he took me into this dark room, and there were all kind of chemicals there, and he showed me how to mix them all up, and he said everything has to be perfect, you see. So he then taught me how to get fine grain from this thing, and that was a revelation really for me. That's how I started, and so I couldn't go back from that. A very unusual but very fortunate start in my photographic life.
What was your first picture?
My first picture. One of my first pictures, I think, was because I could eventually borrow one of the cameras. Yes. You know, my first picture was from my bedroom window, and it was like a sort of silhouette of people walking. You see, there were no training schemes in those days. You didn't have any. I think there was probably one college, I think. Yeah. And I used to go to the Mansfield Public Library, and I would look around, try and find books. And hardly any books that told you about. They were totally technical things, but they didn't show you anything about photojournalism and things. And I went to the art section, and the only pictures I could find and I liked were the Impressionists. Amazing. Yeah. And I liked them very much. And I thought that Degas, for instance, I looked at his pictures and I thought, there's something wonderful about these. And then I discovered Degas were doing ironing and laundress. They were ironing away with this flat iron. And I thought, my mother does that. So that's why I then thought, I'll take those kind of pictures. And I thought, I'm sure I could take a picture like that. And the light, and of course one of my favourite pictures is my mother ironing away and the light coming in through a fan light in the doorway. And
in a way, could that be your first picture where it really made a difference to you? That
was made a big difference to me.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
And so I could find that I could capture, not just make a record, but I could get the sort of feeling of where I was. And I get the atmosphere and take people into my world. It was so wonderful, really.
It is, absolutely.
And so, the main thing is, where do you go to use that business?
Well, then the next stage would be, who was your sort of major influences of the time? Who took you on to the next level? Apart from, I would say, the the staff photographer from the newspaper.
Yes.
He must have been instrumental in your movement towards...
He was. I mean, the thing was that he actually left, and he left the paper, and the editor said, "Well, you know all about it now. You become the staff photographer." And I was 17.
Wow.
Amazing. But I then, they were preparing then for me to go to national service. So when I was 18, then I had to give it all up and go into national service. I remember it was the September of 1950, I think, and there was a colliery disaster. And I went, and it was not far away. It was at a village called Cresswell. I went into the Royal Air Force, and I didn't have a camera of my own, of course. And of course it was impossible. I had no money to buy a camera like that. So I didn't have a camera. I suppose because I was in journalism, when I eventually did the basic training, I did the basic training in on the Cannock Chase in midwinter, which was really a good experience, I would say. A good experience. But then I went to RAF Bletchley, and then I worked at teleprinters in the main communications centre there. So that I did that until about, 2 years. Over 2 years I was doing that. But one of the wonderful things was that Bletchley is near to London. And I was interested, and a lot of my friends, we were interested in trad jazz at the time. And so it was only a train ride to 100 Oxford Street, where we went to the London Jazz Club. And there was Wally Fawkes, Humphrey Lyttelton, and all the people. And that was a great interest for me. And I didn't have a camera to photograph them, you know. But I listened to the music, and I enjoyed that very much indeed. But so then I got to like the idea of London. Yeah. I think we used to stay in the Union Jack Club. If you stayed in the Union Jack Club, you could go to reception, and you could get a ticket. I saw my first opera. Yeah. I saw a Magic Flute at Covent Garden.
Accessible, everything was accessible.
You know, so really, being in the Royal Air Force was quite a bit broadened the horizons incredibly. You know, so
you were getting a bit rusty, I think, with your photography then, because you wouldn't be able to do.
I wasn't doing anything.
So what put you back on track?
But when I went back, of course they welcomed me back to.
So everything just sort of stopped for people when they did national service. You sort of, if you left a job, it would still be there when you. It
was
back.
there. Yes,
gotcha.
They had to take me back. Gotcha. So I went back to the weekly paper, and I sort of. I think I developed my interest really in photojournalism, really.
But you were a changed man then, I would presume.
Yes,
you were an adult, fully grown.
Yes.
A bit more of a worldly man now, weren't
you? I mean, this is something that so many of my contemporaries I know recall, and that is that. There was a marvellous magazine at the time called Picture Post.
That's right.
I remember my uncle took it right from, he'd been taking it from day one, 1938 I think it was. And I used to go and look at it, and I thought it was absolutely wonderful. I thought, well, that is the kind of photography I would like to do.
Bert Hardy and...
Yes,
like that,
all those people. So that was my ambition, really. So I got a portfolio of work in between doing my weekly newspaper work, but they were very. The paper was very good because they would occasionally use my own kind of pictures. But I built up this portfolio. I thought I'll go and see Picture Post. So I went into London and met Picture Post people. They were so kind to me. They really were. I met a man called Bill Stacey. I think he was the picture manager. He managed the photographers. And he was so helpful to me, and he gave me a great long list of people to go and see, you know. He introduced me to a picture post writer who had started a picture agency. This picture post writer was David Mitchell, and he'd started this agency. And I went to see him, and he said, yes, come out for a drink, you know, whatever. And, absolutely wonderful. And I remember going out often with him. I couldn't live in London, not on my weekly paper. But I do remember going to lunch, and there was Grace Robertson and Thurston Hopkins and all these people, and I was surrounded by all these wonderful people. So picture post was my ambition, really. But if you've got no money or anything, that's a main thing. You've got to live, haven't you? So I was really rock bottom, actually, and I decided to leave the weekly paper, but it was a very difficult time then. Very difficult to do freelancing. We didn't even have a phone at home. Can you imagine?
I can imagine. It was very different.
So very different. You know, I'm talking about early 50s, and it's very difficult.
Picture post folded not long after that.
Well, I'm coming to that.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. The thing is that I have to have a life. And so I got a job on an evening newspaper in Northampton. And that was wonderful. There were all young people there, absolutely wonderful. And I enjoyed working there. Then that came to an end, and I went then from there to the evening newspaper in Lincoln. I then went. This is how you progress, you see, in
But you have to go
newspaper
find somewhere
photography
to live as well, and would you have to find somewhere to live in the two?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how was that a system in place? Was there a progression system in place for moving up the ranks?
It's just moving up, you see.
Really?
Yes. So I went to Birmingham. I was very happy there because the picture editor was really good. He was a good man, and he just let me do things, you know. And so that was. There were 2 morning papers and 2 evening papers in Birmingham at the time. But I was still going to London and finding out.
And dining with the picture post.
But I called at the Daily Mail office, and the picture editor saw my work and actually said, well, we could do with some young blood, he said, in Manchester. Yeah. So there's so many veterans around, you know, and wonderful people. So I got to Manchester, and I don't think they really welcomed somebody who'd been sent from London, really. And it took me quite a long time to...
Yeah. So you've been doing the apprenticeship, haven't you?
Yes, yes. I'd spent quite a long time there at the Daily Mail, but there were some wonderful people there.
Yeah.
The chief reporter there was a wonderful man. He taught me about tenacity. Never let go of anything, you know. Keep on, never take no for an answer. Yeah. He was a great reporter. I really liked him very much. He was he was quite an inspiration, really, and the kind of assignments you would get, very newsy, you know, not the sort of things I really wanted ever to do. I mean, the idea of doing a photo essay would have been, you know, they wanted really great single immediate impact pictures, really.
What was pushing you to want more than just a single image? What was in your head?
All my early ambitions, really. I used to take Life magazine and Picture Post, and then I started to get books. I saw, in Life magazine, I've still got it here. I've still got it. I've got the Ernst Haas.
Wow.
New York. I thought
was he an early influencer?
Wonderful.
Ernst Haas was obviously an early influencer.
Oh, great influence. When you saw that, then of course I knew all these names.
Yeah.
You know, all the early Magnum people.
Yeah.
And of course I tried to collect whatever books I could and learn from them. Really. how did they tick? What made them tick?
That's what we all do, though.
Yes, yes. So that was the way I progressed, really.
Of course.
And then there was another young photographer on the Daily Mail at the same time as me, who was Graham Finlayson. Graham managed to get on the Guardian in Manchester when it was just about the Manchester Guardian, see. Then when Graham left the Guardian, I was offered the job on the Guardian.
And that was the early 70s, yeah.
But it wasn't, no, this was the 60s, early 60s.
Really?
Yes. And unfortunately, they only ever had two staff photographers on the Guardian. In 100 years, they only had about 7 in Manchester,
Right.
So it was really difficult. One of the photographers wanted to come back from London, and so I missed the job.
Oh, no.
I couldn't have the job, although I'd been offered it. So I had to wait, and I got to the Daily Mail, and I remember that I was there in 57. As soon as I arrived there, picture post folded.
55,
So I'd nowhere to go.
Oh, your dreams had been shattered.
Oh, my dreams had gone. So I'd nowhere to go then. So I made the best of it. So I did everything. One of the things, I think because they thought I'd been in the RAF, I did quite a lot of flying. And if there's anything, that needed somebody to take stuff from to have an rapide or something, or an Oster, then I'd go and take aerial pictures. So right. I did a lot of that. And in fact, I was around and I got the only photograph of the Moors murder scene from the air.
Yeah. So this book here of how they were, this is for everybody from Diana to James Cameron, Curtis. Wow.
Curtis.
What was
yes.
he like? You've got a shot. You've taken pictures of Andre Curtis in Salford.
Yes.
That's not something I ever imagined him being in Salford.
Andre Curtis came to Manchester one of the Salford quite famous painter is Harold Riley. And Harold was interested in photography. He became really very, very interested in photography, and he decided that we could have a festival, and he had a festival of photography. And brought Curtis over.
Wow.
I remember saying to Andre Curtis, would you like to have a look at Salford with me?
And what went in Rome?
And yes, and so he, of course, and so he came out with me, and we had a wander around Salford.
This is something I've never really envisaged of Curtis being in Salford. And you've got the pictures that he was there.
Oh, yes.
That's
yes.
You were so lucky to get that.
He's got a famous picture of a bench. So I photographed him on a bench and that sort of thing. Yes.
That's wonderful.
I think he was quite an inspiring man, really. I mean, he was telling me, he was showing me how a picture would be.
Yeah, did he give you any tips?
Organised.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So in this book you've got a lot of jazz musicians. In this book itself, this chart on your work through the 50s right up to the all threes and influential people. And you can see you've worked really hard, I mean, in your business.
I never stopped.
You're a good working photographer. And then this book obviously met your journey, and this greeted your journey into the Guardian, and you eventually got your Guardian job.
Yes.
In the early 70s.
Yes.
And then did being at the Guardian give you a chance to shoot some things the way you wanted?
Absolutely. I mean, I thought I'd come home.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely wonderful. It took me a little while to shake off the sort of Daily Mail kind of thing, But Treasurer in Manchester was he just loved you bringing pictures in, and if you had an idea, you'd go and do it.
Yeah, was that how it worked, was it?
And the features editor there in Manchester he was a sort of features editor for the features department. Really was all produced from Manchester, so he was a great colleague, really, and a very great ally, really, and helped me tremendously. I could only just say can I do something?
Yeah.
And he thought it was, and that's why I did the Shepherd. They must have had a big sort of competition. He'd become Shepherd of the Year.
Yes.
And so we went to see him. And I went with a colleague, reporter Alan Dunn, and we went up and we spent a day with him. I thought, wow, this is absolutely wonderful. And I went to the features editor and I said, look, do you think I could do a regular feature through the year, and so we can have a year of a shepherd? Oh yeah, do whatever you like. Can you imagine that? That was wonderful. So I was able to go up and photograph Ray Dent and his family, and throughout the seasons, really.
Yeah.
So that was. So I put all those photographs together eventually, and with Alan doing some texts, and put them all together, and I sent it off to a publisher, and they came back and just said, "Oh yes, we're doing it," and did it.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
I didn't have much say of the layout or anything, but they did it. So that was my first success, really. That was a wonderful part of The Guardian. But I remember I hadn't been anywhere abroad really for the Daily Mail. But
I think the nature of the work you were doing wasn't going to send you abroad, was it? Because
no,
you were doing
no.
local, regional, countrywide news work.
Yes, but I remember the foreign editor said it was family. It was really people. Everybody was interested in what you were doing.
Yeah,
you know,
it was a good group to run.
Everybody, and it was an office where people bounced ideas off people. You know. And that was a wonderful thing when you went into the office that would happen. And so, I mean, the foreign editor said to me, "I'd like you to go to the Middle East, Dennis. I want you to. We've got an interview with King Hussein." And I said, "And then I want you to go to the Emirates." I said, "You can do all this." And he said, "And then I want you to go eventually to Israel." I met up with the Middle East correspondent, David Hurst, and we went to see King Hussein. Absolutely, I mean, you can't believe this, that I'm sitting there with King Hussein, and he's not interested really in politics. He's not interested in talking about politics. He's interested in talking about photography to me. And talking about my family and everything. And so wonderful moments like that. At the same time, I could go to somewhere like Petra while I was waiting, you know. So
how was that as a first ever overseas job, though? All them years of training, you ready for that moment? And
yes.
And then weirdly, you connected with the subject. It doesn't matter who it is, because that it's the king of whatever.
Yes.
And our job, we have privilege that we get to meet these sort of people and find out that sometimes they're not human, but most of the times they're human.
They are.
And there's a connection there, isn't there? And we're very privileged in this industry that we experience that. But you've still got to create the work, you've still got to get the job. And you've spent 30 years getting to that point. 40 years getting to that point. You were ready for it.
When Alan Rutsbridger came to The Guardian, he had an idea. He would send a team of people to a place, and there would be all the specialists, you see, the politicos and the people like Michael Billington would be going, and from the theatre, and so there was a good team of people. I remember we went to Moscow. It was quite a big team with Polly Toynbee, Waldemar Janicek was there.
Just going to reach over, because you've got a book here, which is People of the Soviet Union.
But the thing was about the Soviet Union was that I had a friend at Manchester University who had been at Cambridge, and he had been learning Russian at Cambridge, and he rang me one day and he said, "I've got a bursary. He said, I've never been able to speak Russian. I want to go. Will you come with me?" You see, so I did. We spent we had a few trips of our own to Moscow and St. Petersburg and over into Central Asia.
Yeah.
Yes. So we went right over into Uzbekistan and
Leningrad
and all these kind of places. Yes, and so that was interesting. So I'd got quite a lot of visits that I'd made to the Soviet Union, really.
Yeah.
And then I went at the collapse of the Soviet Union. We went up to Leningrad as it was becoming St. Petersburg again.
Yeah.
Yes. So that was another interesting occasion.
I went to the life before the Soviet collapse, isn't it? That's in the 80s. That was before like the end of the Berlin Wall and all of that sort of the Cold War was sort of coming to an end. What was life like then in the 80s in Russia?
It was pretty bleak, I think, for people.
Yeah.
But for most people, I mean, you could see that photograph of a wedding there.
Yeah.
That I photographed. I mean, that's it's near the university, where you can see right across from the balcony there.
It must have been quite a culture shock for you in a sense, going there in that time, because you really at the height of the Cold War. And then going to Moscow, the enemy is such, as they say.
Yes.
It must have been quite, because I know when I was there in the early 90s, it was a bit daunting. Well, I loved it, but it was like, whoa, it was very daunting. So then it was sort of be quite an interesting place to go.
Everywhere you go, everywhere you see, you're seeing pictures.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you do, don't you? But you know what's interesting about that is that you are seeing pictures because it's new, and that's the beauty of going to places like India, going abroad and stuff, because you're not used to the environment, so you're seeing things which are different to what you're seeing. But the skill is being able to create on your own doorstep, and it's being able to create work which is exactly the same focus and same amount of energy and effort and foresight is what's going on right outside your doorstep. And I teach students that. So if you can't look out what's outside of you and create a narrative and imagery, how are you going to do it when you start venturing further afield? Learn to take pictures here. And that's what you were doing. When you went to the Soviet Union, you went to India, but this is another book. You were equipped, you were ready, you knew how to do it, you knew how to look, you knew how to see. Isn't that right? And this trip to India, what motivated this trip? Was this another Guardian job?
That was a Guardian, yes.
So where did you go here?
Well, I went south. I contacted people that I knew. I was on my own, but I'd contacted people that I knew about, and they were helpful to me. There was a nice guy who was he was like picture editor of a paper in what was then Madrid.
Yeah.
Madras. I'm sorry.
That's right.
Madras, and so I spent time down there, and then I went to Calcutta. I just walked around, and I went to Mother Teresa's house and all this sort of. That's a great shock. Was Calcutta?
Totally different culture.
Quite a shock.
What was the story about you not being able to afford a black Leica? When you taped up your Leica, a silver Leica.
Well,
because I presume you're shooting a Leica.
The thing is, all these cameras were always quite expensive, weren't they?
Absolutely.
So I got I did buy a Leica M2 and with a 35mm 1.4, and that's still my favourite camera. But I might put some black tape on it.
You taped up a Leica.
I think I'd heard that. I think I'd heard that Cartier-Bresson did it. Possibly. Yeah. Quite a few people did that. No, I really couldn't afford to buy a new M2 at the time. Because I have a big family, you see.
Yeah. How many kids?
Yes.
How many kids?
When I was on the Daily Mail in the early days, I would find myself on the night shift most of the time in the early days, and I found it was wonderful because I could spend time with the family, and I could take the kids out, and I could photograph them. Look, if you see my book here.
So how many have you got?
I have 6 children.
You have 6 children.
I have 3 sons and 3 daughters. It's the most wonderful thing of my life is my family.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
There's my wife here.
So you made a little blurb book of it.
I did make a bird.
Fantastic. Is that in the newspaper?
That was in the Daily Mail.
Well, you got your wife in just after birth?
Yes.
And you got her in the Daily Mail?
Well, I didn't get her in the Daily Mail.
Well,
it's a long story, this picture.
You shot her, she ended up...
Do you want me to tell you this long story? I could tell you this long story. The long story is that I photographed my wife and the midwife like this, just after the birth of my second child, who was Jane. I always kept in touch with a wonderful man in London who I'd met right at the very beginning of my quest into real photography. When he was called Norman Hall, and he was the editor of Photography magazine, and he was a great guy who really supported me. Photography magazine had an annual every year. They had the photography annual, and he would use my pictures in there, pictures that had not made the Daily Mail possibly. But he used I'd sent him a picture of my wife, this picture of the birth, and he used it in the photography yearbook. Apparently, I didn't know this at the time. A press copy was sent to the Daily Mail. And there was a famous editor called William Hardcastle. And he looked at this picture, looked at the book, and stopped when he saw this picture of mine. And he said, "What a wonderful picture. Find out who the wife, who the woman is, who the midwife is, find out who the photographer is and everything." So we got the Daily Mail London news desk
to find you all.
To find it all. And they eventually found, they rang Manchester and said, can you find this photographer called Denis Thorpe? And the Daily Mail news editor in Manchester said, "He works here." so that's what happened then. So that was, but they would not have been interested, you see.
It's a great shot.
You see, but it was a kind of picture that. So my family, I've photographed them. Here I photographed my wife with. This is Jane. This was the child then, and there's the last child.
When was that?
This is my pregnant wife, and it's 1970, could be 1974 or something like this. 70, I'd taken it in 74. Anyway, there was a photokina in Cologne. There was a very famous curator of pictures called Fritz Greuber, and he'd seen this picture, and it was on exhibition at the photokina, and it was they'd blown it up about 10 foot wide.
Up there?
Yes.
Right.
And so I got invited there and to photokina.
Wow.
And met all these people, and met so many different people there.
Yeah.
And but these were used eventually, I think, in The Guardian, because it was just about that time I'd eventually gone to The Guardian.
So you had a really good life with The Guardian, haven't you?
I have, yeah. Yes, I've been very fortunate.
I think that showcased itself in some of the books which have come out in later years, and especially with books like A View from the North, it shows your work, it shows who you are as a photographer and your diversity. I mean, some of the composition elements of your work I love, and I've always been attracted to that with the way you compose. You're very tight on your composition, and you can see you understand composition, especially your landscape work when you like the is it the Ribble Viaduct shot?
Ribblehead Viaduct,
Hebden
yes.
Bridge. Hebden
Yes.
Bridge is something out of the Victorian times, and it's just a beautifully composed shot. And a lot of your shots, the way you use people in the relationship with the landscape, and I think it's come out in the years with your association with Blue Coat Press, and just by looking at the books you've got in front of me, sitting in your lovely drawing room in your house in near Stockport.
Not many books here, are there?
Please do not let me look at them, please, because I'll never leave. Because I'm looking at them on my side. In fact, you've got my book.
I have got, of course.
That's
your
me.
book.
Do you sign that?
Of course.
That's my
please.
book.
Yes. Oh, you must sign
your book of mine in Denis.
You must sign
Thorpe's
mine.
house. That is like I'm made up now.
You must sign. You must sign that book.
I'll sign it if it's not signed. I'm going to sign. I got them to sign my book earlier. But what I want to get at is you've opened my eyes to two things today. One, you've shown me this incredible fishing book. I'm blown away by this book. Something I've not seen before. But when I first arrived, I'm going to move this. You showed me, oh, this is heavy. That's why I'm straining. Showed me this book, which is, it is in the style of a bit of like Blue Coat Press style, isn't it? But you made this book. Dennis has just handed me this massive book, and it's heavy, and it's called On Assignments Abroad. And would you say it's your retrospective book?
Yes.
Yeah.
For
So you created the narrative, the dummy. You've done the editing. You've looked at everything, and you created this dummy book. What's going to happen with this now?
well, hopefully I can get it.
How many pictures are in it? How many photos?
I think it could be 200 or so.
It feels like there's 200. My right arm is falling off.
Yes.
I mean, it just covers everything, doesn't it? From
Yes.
Calcutta to Moscow.
Yes, from the States really until everywhere really.
Japan.
What I've done with this book, I think I've sort of tried to explain that.
You take me through it.
What I've done with it, I've tried to sort of, as I said, it's a random collection. What I've tried, I've seen that what people do, what are their activities, and I've seen that they, in different parts of the world, the same activities are mirrored. So I've done a bit of juxtaposing. Say, here we have the passengers on the subway in New York and passengers in Yokohama.
Right, so you juxtaposed them both. It's almost like a diptych, isn't it? Two shots.
Yeah, so
train.
you know, and
that's what's that? Is that's two shots as well?
Yes.
I like that.
But then we've got
the silhouettes together.
I've been to Zagros, seriously, but yes, there's a chef.
Yeah.
In Manhattan, there, but there are two chefs in Perugia.
And what do you feel? What's this book about? What do you feel you're trying to say with this?
Well,
book?
it's just about my world, really, and the way I see it. I'm in Rikers Island prison here.
Where's that?
In New York.
Yeah.
Rikers Island, and there's a prison guard.
Yeah.
And there are slogans all painted beautifully on the walls, and with a cell block here, and the prison guard, and the slogan is there, and it says, "We all are our brother's keeper."
Yeah.
How wonderful is that? See that, and then I'm in miles away, right over in St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
at a penal colony, and they're standing in the middle of a scene which, goodness knows, you couldn't believe. You think you could have to make it. But what they were doing was, in this penal colony, they were making laminated furniture, and so they were using a lot of steam around. So there was loads of steam coming out, and this prisoner standing in the middle there, and I made a portrait of him in the middle of this workshop with screens.
He almost looks like a ballet dancer.
Absolutely.
Doesn't he?
Yes, yes.
Very theatrical. And that's St. Petersburg.
So
I see you link
wherever I've been, I've just tried and photograph ordinary people going about their ordinary lives, whatever they're doing.
Do you think what's next with this book then? Do you think that'll be, you're going to get this published with Blue Cork? Is this going to happen with Blue Cork Press, do you think?
Well, I would hope so, yes. I would hope so.
Yeah. What about this Trawlerman? Because you've got to do something with that.
The Trawlerman, yes.
You have to do something with that.
I have to do something with it.
You do have to do something with that. I'm demanding you do something.
I will.
Because that's sort of... It's very different to what you shot, in a sense. Because it's been square format. It is a different... It isn't... It sounds complicated. It is and it isn't very different to what you've normally shot. But there's a difference about it. There's a difference.
There's a lot of...
Is there a naivety to
there's
that?
There's a lot of years.
You were right in their faces.
There's a lot of years in between, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
That one.
You had a different approach.
That's my very early years, really.
Yeah, but for 1958...
There's quite a lot of early years there. Yeah.
That's pretty accomplished. But a very different style to what you went on to actually maintain, do. Obviously there's influence in there, but there's a style... There's something very different about that. There's some beautiful... I can't believe... I've not seen this before.
That is...
blew me away.
That's where I've always wanted to be, I think.
What, on a trawler, passing your tin out to a passing ball?
Yes, I've always wanted to be in that... in a situation where I can observe people.
Evolve.
And be involved with people.
It's amazing.
Yes.
It's like fascinating listening to it. Who's been your biggest influence in your life in terms of your photography or just your general life in general?
I admired so many people and photographers, really. I mean, it would be wonderful to say that I got tremendously inspired by, privilege of having to walk around Salford with Andre Curtage.
Inspiration comes at different stages of your life, doesn't it?
It does. No one person, really, I would say. I mean, I was so pleased to meet Bert Hardy, and I mean, he'd been quite a big influence in my early days, seeing all his pictures.
Yeah.
And I went to photograph him, and he's been there somewhere.
Yeah.
And,
but there's people at the time, like Humphrey Spender, all of these sort of people in that period who were around here, like photographers from this area, because you were, this is where you come from. So Humphrey Spender was a particular photographer. There was a lot of, with the mass communication group in Bolton and Blackpool, the mass observation group. Did you link into any of that when you?
I did meet Humphrey Spender once. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
But were you aware of what they were doing at the time?
Yeah.
Yes. Was that in any way sort of influence on you? What was Spender like?
I only met him once. With other people. So.
Yeah. What about your archive now? Where's all your archive?
Well, my archive really will be. I'm working at it, and you saw those pictures of the colour in the Trawlerman book.
Yeah.
Now, colour was difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I took a lot of pictures of on Kodachrome.
Yeah.
During my early years, they couldn't do anything with them.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by couldn't do anything with them?
Well, you couldn't print them.
Right, gotcha.
Or you could have them printed, and that cost a fortune.
Yeah.
So you could only project them, really.
Of course, yeah.
So, and I think magazines and people at the time, newspapers, newspapers couldn't print colour anyway,
Yeah.
but magazines and would always want they'd always want a big format colour if they were using colour.
Yeah.
So really, I stored a lot of my colour work, and I found eventually that I could scan my early 1950s colour,
Wow.
and for the Trawlermen book, and it worked. Absolutely wonderful after all those years.
How old is it?
Well, I mean, that would be from 50.
Oh, I thought you meant your scanner.
Oh my!
Oh, no, I thought you meant how old. But you had a scanner and you found your scanner from.
Oh no! I've got a new scanner.
So
I had a new scanner. Yes.
Your archive is all in your possession.
It is.
And you're looking after it.
But a lot of my archive is already with the Guardian.
The Guardian, yeah.
Because they've got a really super place.
Yeah, and that's where do you think it'll go for the future in terms of historical?
Well, hopefully it'll just go to the Guardian,
so
and they can do
Guardian, yeah.
You know. I
and
mean,
do you still get syndicated to the Guardian with your work? So
Yes.
people want to buy. Do you syndicate with anybody else like Alamy or any other?
No.
You don't.
No,
You're not
no,
Getty or anything
no,
like that.
no.
You don't.
No. Most of my work has been really through newspapers and through the Guardian.
Yeah.
Most of my.
What scanner are you using?
I knew you were going to ask me that.
Sorry.
Whatever is the Epson, whatever is
5,000, 9,000.
whatever it is,
like that, yeah.
whatever is that's the one I've used. But before that, when I first started with this scanning, you see, I've always had a darkroom here.
Wow.
I've always made my own prints, whenever possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm obviously when I was working in a newspaper office, you've got a department with dark rooms and a staff doing prints. But they were always very, very, at the Guardian, they were always very, very kind, and they wouldn't mind me supervising. But the dark room work I enjoyed. I like the craft of photography.
Yes, of course.
I really loved it.
Yeah, you can see that on your
I have two lights Focomat enlargers, which unfortunately I've just let go. Because I really can't work in. I'm a bit ancient, and I haven't got the energy now.
Yeah.
To spend time rocking the dish.
Not even with Test Match Special in the background, with cricket on. And...
Yes, but so that's it. But what I've got was a lot of 12 by 16 prints.
Yeah.
And Alan Rusbridger organised me a flatbed scanner, an A3 scanner. So I was able to make lots of my archive
the scan
from the original prints.
Yeah.
You know, where I'd made all the, instead of photoshopping, I'd actually done all the work in the darkroom.
Right. Yeah.
See?
Yeah. Well, it is the same thing, really, isn't it? It's
yeah.
Digital.
I'd done all the work in the darkroom.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm no good at Photoshop at all. I don't want to be.
No, who is though?
I don't want to be any good at Photoshop.
You only need to know what you need to know.
All I need to know is how to get rid of blemishes and things like that.
And you know what?
But for moving people,
and you know what?
You're not allowed.
All I know, and that's all you need to know. I've spent years just resizing, contrast levels, get rid of that bit of dirt from my lens. That's it. It's done. You don't need to do anything more. Good old press photographers. We don't manipulate images. Listen, it's been wonderful, Dennis. Thank you so much for taking the time and inviting me to your home and just listening to your stories and we're finding out more about the other work, because one final question is what we discussed when I first met you, and I said, why haven't you got a website?
I don't really know.
I was so surprised. Everything I find on you is a bit of Wiki and The Guardian. There should be this big website saying Denis Thorpe, and you should be educating us, things like that. And you
perhaps I need somebody to do it for me, actually, possibly.
You do need
possibly, but I've not. I've probably come a little bit late into websites and things. I mean, I carried when I was coming to the end of my time as a staff man at The Guardian. Then I'd obviously got into the Macs and things. We were just into scanning and Macs, and so I carried on through that. But I think I came a bit late for making websites. You see. So I don't do that.
You don't need one made for you. There's lots of simple, good website organisations out there who have a simple setup template, which costs you £10 a month to run it. And you should have somewhere to showcase your archive and show who you are.
Perhaps one of the family might be able to do it. My son Peter is a photographer.
I'm happy to give you some advice and stuff on that later on after that. But listen, Denis, it's been wonderful, and I look forward to seeing your website soon. Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure listening to you, and let's just keep me updated.
Thank you. Well, I'll be able to go and photograph my birds again now, won't I?
Oh, don't let me stop you from your birds. Don't let me stop you at all. It's really wonderful.